Afternoon. Thank you. Nice hearty good afternoon. On behalf of Tim Kimmel, Adam Jordan, Lucy Beppu, myself, Paul Ried, I'm happy to welcome you to our 2012 Client Economic Outlook. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. Some of you have come from quite some distance to join us. So we appreciate that very much. I think you'll find the program insightful. It wasn't a joke. Interesting, and I dare say comforting. Oh. Well, you know, it's been just 2 days since the election. And let me ask a couple questions. You know, I struggled with these questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway. How many are pleased with the results by a show of hands? How many are pleased with the results of the election? We got 2 hands over here. How many are not? How many are just glad it's over? Okay. I fall into that category as well. You know, whatever your political view, now our hope and prayer is that those in the other Washington will get down to business. We're going to really work together, get our country back on track, and solve our problems for a bright future. So we're pleased to have as our keynote speaker Miles Gordon. Miles is CEO of Gordon Group Associates, and he was featured in 5 of our last Economic Outlook seminars. He received rave reviews from you and others for his insight, candor, and his insightful way of making complex concepts translating those in a very simple and understandable fashion. He's former CEO of ING Advisors Network and former chairman and founder of Financial Network Investment Corporation. He has extensive background in securities regulation, the investment management industry, and economics. Mr. Gordon's the first person in the nation to serve as director or trustee for each of the industry's 3 primary associations: the National Association of Securities Dealers, Securities Industry Association, and Financial Planning Association. I've known Miles actually personally for over 25 years as well. He's been a leader in the financial services industry for over 25 years, actually more like 30 years. He's currently a consultant to Fidelity Investments and a frequent speaker at both events like this as well as to advisors. So Miles, welcome.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that very nice introduction. I never know why people clap before they hear what a speaker has to say. They may want to run you out of town. But thank you. Well, I think we owe a big round of applause to Paul and his staff, Paul, Tim, Adam, Lucy. Let's give them a big round of applause. Paul, stand up. I remember when Paul joined us at my old firm about 25 years ago, and Paul was basically a rookie at that point in time. And he said, you know, I really don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, Paul, if you keep up what you say with integrity, with putting the clients first, he said, you'll do fine. Well, he's done real well by being recognized one of the top planners, not only around here, but in the whole country. So again, a big round of applause for him. But I also know he couldn't do it without his staff and longtime partner, Tim. I always say that the guy who gets the recognition or the gal who gets the recognition generally doesn't deserve it. It's the people that work right underneath him. Well, again, thanks for inviting me back. And how many people have heard me speak before? A lot. Well, hope your memories aren't that good. Okay, before I begin, I have to give a couple of disclosures, get them out of the way. I am going to talk about the politics of what's just happened. So talking about politics, I will tell you I am not a Democrat, although my Democratic friends think I'm one step to the right of Attila the Hun. I'm not a Republican, although my Republican friends think I'm a socialist. I'm a classic independent, so that's where I'm at. How many people here consider yourselves Democrats? It's much smaller than this morning. This morning's crowd was actually much more. Republicans? All the Republicans came in the afternoon. I don't know. And the independents? A lot of independents. That's great. I would have actually, prior to the election, I would have asked the independents where their heads were at, because frankly, I was wrong. I thought Romney, as late as Tuesday afternoon, we had a crowd, I thought Romney would win. And looking back at it and trying to dissect it, people have asked me if I changed my talk. I said, well, I have to. I mean, but why was I wrong? Because your crowds, the crowds like yourselves, I've been asking that question. I've been coming to crowds for years, really haven't been wrong. But why was I wrong? First, look around. We're all getting a little older. Most people here are white, not minority, okay? The crowds of Democrat, Republican, Independent, that's fine. That's been the way for many, many years. And I could tell you beforehand, I'd ask the question of the independents, because I assumed that the Democrats are going to vote for the president and the Republicans will vote for Romney. So I'd always ask the independents, and I'm not going to get to it now, we don't have much time. But the results were of all the crowds that I had talked to, which is you're the 19th crowd I've talked to in the last 30 days. Okay? And then I had numerous crowds before that, not as many, but I had numerous. Of the independents, which are many, 80% of the men were going to vote for Romney. The women weren't, that was the hard one, of the independent women. And so I said, this is going to be a turnout of the independent women. How do they vote? That will determine the key. And then I used to ask questions about the enthusiasm factor. How enthusiastic are you about voting for Romney or Obama? Well, the Democrats was a very low enthusiasm factor. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was about a 4. And the Republicans was much higher, 7, 8, 9. So I said, well, the Republicans are going to turn out in droves, but the Democrats won't. Well, where was I wrong? Younger people who I did not think would turn out, and the minorities, which I didn't think would turn out, well, they turned out in big numbers. And so now, in fact, if you read the Wall Street Journal today, the electorate is shifting. It is not white, middle, upper middle class, because we're getting older, and the younger people coming in are numerous. Now, for those, most of you are Republican in this room, many of you are sitting there saying, does the Republican Party have a chance, or is it gone? And it has a good chance. If it starts to move a little bit to the center, I think the Republican Party is in better shape than the Democratic Party. I'm not going to get into all the whys and wherefores, but real quickly, off the top of your heads, real quick, who is the most likely Democratic presidential nominee in 4 years from now? Because it won't be Obama. Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. I have asked that question now 3 groups. No, wait a minute. 4 groups. And everybody has said, not everybody, but almost everybody, first thing off the top of their head, Hillary Clinton. How old will she be in 4 years? 69. She and I are the exact same age. The exact same age. In fact, by the way, Romney and I were born within 10 days of each other in the same hospital. Now, it's not that big a deal, the hospital, because I found out in Detroit in that year, all the kids were born in the same hospital. But anyways, we're 65. Hillary is 65. She will be 69. I hate to say it, with the electorate the way it's going, we are has-beens. Pretty much has-beens. Real quickly, Republicans, give me your top 3 potential nominees in 4 years from now. Ryan, Rubio, Christie. How old are all of them? The early 40s. And by that time, they'll all have had experience. Right now, they're pretty inexperienced. But you give them 4 years, you'll have every one of them in their mid-40s. And Rubio, of course, speaks fluent Spanish and is Latino. If he had asked me right now who it would be, it'd be him. But that's 4 years from now. It doesn't make any difference. But the point, and how many governors are there, Democrat, Republican? Who has the majority? Republicans have a vast majority of governors. They have the bench strength. They have the up-and-comers. The Democrats, and I hate to use this example because it reminds me of the World Series. I'm from Detroit. And Detroit had a great season up until the last 4 games. And they beat the heck out of the Yankees. I mean, I think it was a 4 game, did we win 4 games straight? I think so. And I mean, I was in my glory. We're going to come in and didn't do too well in the World Series. The Yankees were old. The Yankees were old. The Democrats are getting old. And so I don't think they're going to appeal to the new generation coming up. So, again, I don't want to rehash the election, but why did Romney lose? There was 2 or 3 things that killed him because he was old. Although he looks young. He's not cool. You're absolutely right. And I didn't get that until about a week or so ago. I asked, I was at dinner with somebody your age, well, what do you think? Oh, he's not cool. And I said, he's not too sincere. Okay. We're going to move on. Okay, now, what happened? Men voted for Romney, big time. White men voted for Romney, big time. Where he missed the boat was on the woman's vote and on the younger minorities. Now, how many people here, I'm going to come back to this in a second, but how many people here would like to see bipartisanship compromise in Washington, D.C.? Everybody should raise their hand. Even you people way down there. All right. We know in the last couple of years there hasn't been. And the $64 question, there hasn't been. Whose fault is it? Is it Obama's fault or the Republicans' fault? It's both. But if you had to place the blame, how many people here would vote to say it's the Republicans' fault? It's the president's fault. Well, the majority is the Republicans. Well, here's a couple things that killed Romney. There was a major Republican figure in Washington, D.C., I don't want to give you too much because it's too easy to guess then, who made a dumb remark about 2 years ago. He said that I hope that my main goal is to make sure that Obama is a one-term president. Who said that? Mitch McConnell, House Minority Leader, Senate Minority Leader. That has stuck with him. That's telling you he's not going to cooperate. That hurt Romney. Romney really does reach out. I personally think he is a centrist. We'll never know now, it's not important. But he was in Massachusetts, in Salt Lake City, working in Bain Capital. You have to be able to bring people together to make a deal. Anyways, I think he would have. But he was stuck with that. To boot, how many people here know about the filibuster rule? Who doesn't? Be honest. Okay, good. I always like to have a young lady or somebody of the female persuasion up in front be honest with me. Because trust me, 3/4 of these people have no idea what the filibuster rule is. The filibuster rule to me is the single most important thing in Washington. If we could get some sort of change in this, because it is not in the Constitution, it's the Senate rule. But basically it's this. The House is the one who originates all money bills, all bills, in fact. The Senate does not. It's the House. Everything. That's where the real power is. The real power is in the president, because the president can veto anything that the House wants. Where does the Senate come into play? Anybody? Where does the Senate come into play? House, let's take a tax bill. House brings up a tax bill. What does the Senate do? They have a conference committee. They say, yeah, we like this. This is our bill. We'll conference, and we'll come up with a bill. We'll send it to the president. He can either veto it, blah, blah, blah. Well, the Senate, if they don't like the bill, the minority doesn't like the bill, this is put in as a protection to make sure that there's not a tyranny of the majority. So the Senate a minority can block it by a filibuster. And a filibuster in the olden days, that is up to about 10 years or so ago, basically what happened is the senator who wanted to filibuster it would have to stand in the well of the Senate and talk and talk and talk and talk, read the telephone book. And just to shut him up, you had to have a certain number of votes to shut him up, get him out of there. It's called cloture, stop the debate. Well, about 10 or 15 years ago, the Senate on its own decided, well, you don't really have to be in the well of the Senate to talk and talk. And in fact, if a guy had to go to the bathroom, he had to find somebody else to immediately keep talking. Not anymore. Now all you got to do is, I'm not going to do it by phone, do it by email. I'm filibustering. End of story. That is fundamentally wrong. We average about 50 or so filibusters for a 2-year term for about 100 years. About 50. How many do you think we had in this last term in Congress, in Senate?
260.
Well, I thought the number's 307. 300, 5 times the number. And that is from the Senate minority, from a guy whose leadership says, I want to get rid of Obama or make sure he's a one-term president. I ask you, who do you think is the obstructionist? And you can argue all day long, we'll never know, but the facts support that. That's number one. Mitch McConnell's remark from 2 years ago really hurt those people who wanted bipartisanship, which is most people. Number two, the swing vote, which turns out not to be the total swing vote, but certainly a major, major vote, are the women. And especially those independent women. Well, when you add these two unbelievable lack of term I can give you is idiots from Missouri and Indiana say, I can't even get the words out of my mouth, it's so stupid. How they could think that is idiotic, and then to say it is double, triple idiotic. And my wife is the perfect example. She says, I don't like Obama, I don't like what he's doing, I don't like Obama, I don't like this, but I sure as heck ain't voting for people like this. So what happens? 44% of the women vote for Romney, 46 didn't. Romney didn't stand a chance. And those two guys, to show you how bad they were, in Indiana and Missouri, Romney took those states by 10%, like 60-40. Those idiots lost by 10%. You know how hard that is to do? A 20-point swing is almost virtually impossible, but these guys did it. So if the Republicans stay with that mindset, they are the Liberal Party of England. The Liberal Party of England used to be a major party. The last time they won an election was 1916. And that's where the Republicans are headed. They're headed that way. However, will they change? We will see, because they have a chance, because they have to have it, because of something called the, something that's going to happen in 6 weeks. The fiscal cliff. How many people know about the fiscal cliff? Okay, let's be honest. Who doesn't? All right, we have some honest people in the room who save the rest of the room. Because if everybody knew, I was either not going to talk about it or let you explain it. So I'll explain it. Okay, fiscal cliff. In the summer of 2011, July, August, and there's a great book written by Bob Woodward. Okay? You're young enough and pretty enough. Do you know who Bob Woodward is? I'm putting her on the spot. This is a tough one for her. He's a journalist. Very good. You're right. What was he kind of known for? Oh, no, don't tell her. It's cheating. Watergate. Okay. My point is that younger people, they have forgotten about Watergate. They've forgotten who Bob Woodward is. He's a great journalist, kind of down the middle. He wrote a great book called The Price of Politics. He came out about not quite 2 months ago. I thought it would be a bigger effect because it talks about the whole fiscal debacle of a year and a half ago. If you want to read it, I suggest you do this. Don't read the whole book. It's a waste of time. go to Barnes & Noble, take the book off the shelf, sit down with a cup of coffee in their nice chair, nice couch, and read the first chapter and the last chapter. It'll take you about 20 minutes. It's the entire book. And I'm not going to be a sucker anymore because I read all these books by the journalists. They come out, oh, I said, man, this was really great. David Brooks, Tom Freeman, Bob Woodward, I read them all. And after every one of them, I swear, I'm never going to read another whole book in my life. Well, this one, right down the road. The first chapter is great, and the last chapter explains the whole thing. And that will tell you who do you think was the reason why the fiscal cliff is coming about, the lack of cooperation, the lack of an agreement back in the summer of 11. And read the book, I won't tell you. If you really want to know, you can twist my arm. Woodward blames it on the president. But you can make an argument both ways. So, in any event, what would have happened if the debt ceiling had not been raised in the summer of 11? What would have happened to the United States? What would have happened to our credit? What would we have done? We would have defaulted. We would have defaulted. What does that mean? Is that a couple months problem, a couple years problem, a couple generations problem? What is it? How big is it? Mega long term, way beyond any of our lifetimes. The reason for it is there have been basically two reserve currencies, paper currencies that have lasted, that people have kind of trusted over the last hundreds of years. Who are they? One is the United States. Second one, I heard Germany? The British pound. Why the British pound? Because they've never defaulted. The last time they were in debt, where they got into debt, was in 1697. And they've always paid their debts. So people kind of trust it. Well, if we had defaulted, we couldn't say that. And as a result, we would lose our standing. What would have happened to our currency? It would have gone like this. I mean, it would have been a disaster. Disaster. And it was being predicted that it would be financial Armageddon. So we all knew the result. But we had to get there. And Obama says, well, I need more money over here from taxes. And Boehner says, no, we got to reduce spending. As a compromise, they came up with saying, let's just do this. Let's raise the debt ceiling until 2013. Let's raise taxes on January 1st of 2013. Let's lower spending on January 1st of 2013. And so for a year and a half, no problem. Now I ask you, during the campaign, the debates, how many questions were asked about this? Zero. Absolutely zero. And again, please believe me, I am not a biased person one way or another. I really am not. But when people say the media is somewhat biased, I have to agree. Because how not to ask the president? I can understand not asking Romney. I mean, you could say, Mr. Romney, what are you going to do? But it wasn't his problem. Well, he wasn't part of it. But the president was right smack in the middle of it. And it was his compromise. And for Bob Schieffer not to say, well, what are you going to do in a month and a half or 2.5 months? It is beyond coincidence that it did not come up in 3 debates. And that, to me, is a tremendous liberal bias. Because they didn't want to embarrass the guy. They were told, you can't ask this question. It is absolutely impossible not to have brought it up. Because the next morning, after the election, yesterday morning, what's the first thing at 7 o'clock in the morning? What's going to happen to the fiscal cliff? All of a sudden, they woke up and asked the question. Okay, so do you understand now what's happening? It's like a big, big accident waiting to happen. And we know it's going to happen. You see it out there, and you're driving along at 60 miles an hour, and right now, you're in a car, and you're putting on the gas. You're not putting on the brake. And if you put on the brakes too late, what will happen? Big accident. How big? Almost for sure, not almost, for sure. Next quarter, that would be the first quarter of 13, we will go into a recession. Right now, the country's going about 1% to 2%. That's slow. Why? We'll get into that in a few minutes. But it's growing slowly. Growing, yes, but slowly. This is estimated to drop off anywhere between 3 and 5% like that. Do the math. You're going to go to either minus -1 or 2 to minus 3, 4, or 5. Anything minus is a recession. Now, let me ask you, what is worse, the financial Armageddon potential of the summer of 11, which was generational in effect, or do nothing right now, go into recession? What has the greater long-term effect? Summer of 11 situation or the fiscal cliff right now? Fiscal cliff just means we're going to go into recession. How long will it take to get out of it? 6 months, 9 months. Average recession lasts about 8 months. In 2 years, you wouldn't even know we had it. There's no long-term effect. In fact, you could argue it'll help reduce the deficit. You're going to raise taxes, you're going to raise revenues, and you're going to cut expenses. The rating agencies will love you. So my point is that if they were that close a year and a half ago to letting it happen, they may say, what the heck? Let's do it. President can say, hey, this is my last term. I don't care. The House can say, well, we've got 2 years. Will they do that? And that is the $64 question. I submit to you the reason why the stock market went down so much yesterday is that most of the people in Wall Street thought that Romney would win. And if Romney had won, would there have been a fiscal cliff problem? Answer, no. Because the House was going to stay Republican. They knew that. Okay? And the House would have passed a bill, and Romney would sign it on January 21st. The president could either kick it to him, or if the president says, no, I'm going to stick up for my guns, I'll let you do the problem, fine. On January 21st, Romney would have reversed it. So you wouldn't have had a fiscal cliff. And that's what the market was thinking, that they're going to kick it down the road, because Romney had pretty much said, let it be known, just kick it down the road, come up with a commission, and let me handle the tax plan and the spending plan, and let's see what we can do. With Obama now, we don't know. We don't know. What to watch for? If you see that the Republicans are leaning towards Boehner, who is the Speaker of the House, if you hear him being the lead spokesman, if you hear him being, he will be the Speaker, and you don't hear anything else, Boehner is a compromiser. Boehner wants to compromise. He's much more of a centrist than the Tea Partiers on a bet. Then I think you're going to see a kick down the road. That is, no fiscal cliff goes into effect. You'll have a commission being appointed that will report back somewhere between 6 and 12 months down the road, and then we'll have a new solution, most likely. But it won't be on January 1 of 13, no fiscal cliff. If you see that, then the stock market will reverse itself. It'll have confidence that you're going to have compromise. However, if you see that there's a challenge coming from Boehner, in other words, Boehner says something, and then you hear other Republicans saying, well, we're not quite sure, because the Speaker of the House is an elected position of that party. We don't elect the Speaker of the House. It's they elect the Speaker. And if the Tea Partiers, the real strong, fervent, we got to cut spending, and that's it, and we're not going to agree to any tax increases because Grover Norquist, some jackass in Washington, D.C., who is the most dangerous person in this country. I'm telling you, I'm saying that honestly, he's the most dangerous person in this country because he is funding all of these partiers and saying, no, you can't raise any taxes. And they listen to him because most of these guys don't know anything about it. But if the Tea Partiers go along that route, and they're talking right now, as we talk, they're talking about who do we really want to support? Boehner, the compromiser, or somebody else, basically probably Cantor, who is the number 2 person in the House, in the GOP House. He's House Majority Leader, really number 2 person. In that book, you can see how Cantor inserts himself. Cantor is essentially a snake. So, any event, if Boehner starts to lose and has to try to shore up, maybe no compromise. If you hear Cantor's name come in, probably no compromise. And that basically means recession. First quarter. What does that do to recession? Well, let's move on here. I'll give you the conclusions first. I think I've exhausted what I'm talking about, the fiscal cliff. Any questions, I'll be glad to take them right now. I'll be staying around just for a few minutes because I got to catch a plane. But long and short of it is, what is the effect if we have a fiscal cliff or if we don't? Well, first, the economy. The economy, as I said, is slowly moving along ahead. Good. But you can get it derailed real fast. Now, I don't care if Romney came in or Obama came in, absent the fiscal cliff situation, it didn't make too much difference. This economy is going to just plug ahead slowly. There's not going to be rapid growth. It is structural. Inside of what we're dealing with just can't be changed overnight. It is slowly getting better. That's good news. And slowly getting better is good. Too fast is no good, but of course, going the other way is bad. What is getting better? Unemployment. Okay? Now, if you remember, Romney said to the president in that first debate, Mr. President, you have been president for 44 months and the unemployment rate was never below 8%. And there's been no president ever reelected. Okay? What happened 2 days later? The unemployment rate comes out at 7.8%. So Romney can't say that. How many of you think that that was jimmied up? That was a phony number? How many think it was a real number? Small minority. And how many don't think? Well, I'll just give you my 2 cents worth for whatever it's worth. It's probably not worth much. It was not a jimmied up number, because it'd be almost virtually impossible. It's not released until 4:30 after the markets close, and you'd have to have several thousand people in on the conspiracy who are career bureaucrats, and if it became known, they would be fired and maybe go to jail. I don't know about you, and if I was one of those career bureaucrats, I'm not in on it. Whenever you see a percent, there'll always be a little jimmied. But it's hard to get a lot of people involved with that. If you're only asking a person a number, like how many jobs were created last month? 172,000. Okay. That number can be jimmied. Because I know what happens in the state of California, as an example, which is 1/10 the number of people in the country, land of fruits and nuts. What they do is, how many jobs are you creating? And the EDD, which is the office that does the computation in the state of California, said, how many do you want? You think I'm kidding? And basically, it's one person. That can be jimmied. But when you come to the unemployment rates, it can't be. But in truth and in fact, the unemployment rate, what you hear of 7.8, 8.1, really means it is not the real unemployment rate you're looking at. What you want to see is, sure, you want the unemployment rate to go down. The Fed looks at the unemployment rate when it's determining whether or not interest rates should go up or should they go down. Well, the real number they're looking at, if you want to go into it, the smartest thing you can do, by the way, is just listen to Paul and Adam and Tim. They'll tell you. But if you have something to do, you got nothing to do, look at this number. It's called the U6 number. The U6 is the unemployment rate plus the underemployed. What does underemployed mean? Part-timers. That's the big number of the unemployed. It also means people who are taking a job well less than what they were before, but the real big number is the part-timers. Now, part-timers used to be an indicator that when you had a slow recession or a slowdown and you saw a pickup in part-timers, I go, that's great, because the economy's on its way back. People are hiring. So like when I was the president of the company for 20 years, and I loved to bring in part-timers. Why did I like part-timers? No benefits. Number 2. What's that? I could lay them off. How easily? Come into my office or I'll go to you. You're next. And if I have 3 or 4 people that I wanted to get rid of, and I know I sound very crass, but I hate to tell you, folks, that's how CEOs think. Not nice. Well, that's okay. We can wait. It's a very important phone call. What would happen is that if I had 3 or 4 people we had to get rid of, I mean, they just were not good employees, I'd say, general layoff, you 4, who I don't like, are gone. And then 2 weeks later, layoff over, and I didn't have to bring them back. But anyways, but part-timers, you have to worry about the benefits, costs, etc. Now what's happened is we've shifted. Because basically, technology. Companies can tell when they are going to need people, almost on an hourly basis. There's an article about Fresh and Easy. Is that up here at all? It's a grocery store chain, small chain. Anyway, and what they do is they bring in almost all part-timers. And they say they can, by their inventories, they can tell when they're going to need more people. And they tell people to come in at 1 o'clock, at 10 o'clock that morning. And so they're almost full-timers, but they only pay them as if they're part-timers. Pay them as part-timers. They figured out the wage of the full-timer was $17 an hour. The part-timer was $10. So what do? You start hiring more part-timers and more part-timers. Do they have as much income as full-timers? No. They spend less. Now, my wife, she feels sorry for them. She feels sorry for the economy. So as I tell her there's more part-timers, she says, then I have to go out and spend more. And you guys are laughing. I'm not. She honestly believes it. So anyway. So you have, and the part-time number plus the unemployment rate comes to about 14.7% of the workforce, 1 in 7. The Fed, which we all know, has been lowering rates. They look at 2 things before they make a decision. And I personally think that they're starting to think and starting to smell that rates could go up, not anytime soon. So if you're refinancing, by the way, or you're looking to buy a house, now, because in a year from now, long-term rates could be higher. But we're in that period now. But the Fed looks at several different things about when it's going to change. And one is the unemployment rate, not the 7.8 or 8.1. They know the number. They know it's the U6 number. That number has stayed steady for well over a year. It hasn't gone anywhere. They want to see that number come down to at least 14% and maybe even lower than that. So you got a ways to go. And number 2 is they look at the inflation rate. And that basically is long-term rates is the best way to look at it. And long-term rates now are kept coming down, and that's good. But they seem to have been flattening out. And basically, as the slope gets less steep, that is, starts to slope out and start to flatten out and goes up, the Fed will start to raise rates. So the big drop in rates is well over. Now it's the next move will depend on how fast it comes. How fast will it come? Depends a lot on several different items. One is housing. Housing, as it starts to make a comeback, and it is, around this area over here, your houses probably didn't drop as much as around the country, I'd imagine, because you have a good, great diverse economy here. I mean, when I first started to come up here, this state was Boeing. Boeing, a great company, but you can't depend on one company. Now, you start naming them. Boy, you got them left and right. I mean, this is a fabulous, fabulous area. But my point is that as the economy starts to grow, it starts to pick up on itself, and rates could start to move up on you. That's when the Fed will follow rates. The Fed, for the last 6-7 years, has followed rates. Rates have been going down, it's going down with it. If rates start to go up, long rates, because they control short rates, they don't control long rates. And if long rates start to go up, that's when it'll all end. But they will go up for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. That is, there's growth in the economy. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer to it. The economy is also going to stay slow because of productivity. I'm talking about at the consumer level, at the worker level. You're not going to say incomes go way up. Productivity. What do I mean by productivity? Anybody? That is, you're able to make the same amount of goods with fewer workers because of technology. As an example, in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, the heartbelt of the coal country, the steel country, it has not been a growth place for many, many years now. That's all gone overseas. Last year they announced, I think it's U.S. Steel, announced they're putting in a new plant in Youngstown. Why did they do that? This typifies what's going on in the United States. Why did they do that? Why would they come back to the United States to feel good about Youngstown, Ohio? Technology. You're on a roll. Go ahead. What did technology provide? They can make more steel with less workers. Okay? And before we come to, I'll give you the example. Well, I'll give you the example right now. 40 years ago, when they abandoned, they could make X amount of steel with 3,000 workers. A friend of mine who lives there, he gave me the numbers, and I said, this is great. And he goes, well, that's really. They can now produce at that same plant 4X, 4 times the amount of steel with 3,000 workers. How much? 300. 90% less workers, 4 times the amount of steel. And what do they do with wages? If you don't want to work, I got somebody else who will. That's right. Wages go down. Then my wife has to spend more. And you know what? She does. I don't know about you guys, but when we live in Montana in the summer and Palm Springs in the wintertime, and every year when I come back, I always say, please, no more pillows on the couch or on the bed. Do any of you guys, am I the only guy who has that? I cannot figure out why. So this year we come back, and I said, oh, great. We still have the same number of pillows. She redid them all. Can't help herself. So anyways, you got productivity that is going on in spades. What about energy costs in the United States? It's going to go down. We're starting to find more. In fact, the guys from Fidelity are saying that the finds that they are making now, we have 3 times the reserves of Saudi Arabia. Yeah. 3 times. That's why when Romney was coming in, everybody thought that he would be better for energy. Well, Obama, does he want to have us be more energy independent? Sure, he does. And I think that you will see more energy drilling here in many of these places because that gets us off of the Middle Eastern oil kick. Okay? And if you always look at the price of oil, our oil is cheaper than world oil by about $20. So a company may say, well, I want to come back to the United States because oil's cheaper. I don't have to worry about as much transportation cost. Currency, our currency is a stable currency. If we had defaulted, it wouldn't be a stable currency, and then you'd have all kinds of problems, but we have that. Our government is somewhat more stable than the other governments. Like look in China, they have this new thing. The new premier, he was gone for 2 weeks. We didn't know where he was. We're not sure it's the same guy. We're pretty sure that on January 20th, Obama will be sworn in, and he's the Obama who won the election. And that Romney and he will shake hands. In fact, Romney gave a great conciliatory speech. Well, hold on, ma'am. I gotta run. So, but there's another factor that's coming into play. Why jobs are coming back into the United States, that's why we will grow, albeit slowly. And that's something called quality. The U.S. is now being perceived as a quality manufacturer at all different ends. And as I mentioned to you probably over the years, if you've been nice enough to come back and hear me, I run a company of 3 people. Actually, I don't run the company of 3 people. I'm number 3. Who is number 2? My wife. And who's number 1? The dog. You laugh. If it was just me, you're on your own. Don't worry about it. The dog, we have to plan. Got to make sure she's fed. You got to do this, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, about 7, 8 months ago, my wife comes running into the kitchen in the morning, and she says, "Where's the dog food? I got to check the dog food." Okay, what's the problem with the dog food? I just heard that made in China dog food is no good. It's causing dogs to have upset stomachs and, God forbid, die. She says, "For you, I don't care. Whatever you want to do, it's fine." I said, "But that dog is dependent on us." "You're a big boy," she says. "You want to eat Chinese dog food? Fine, go ahead." So anyways, we go check the dog food. And sure enough, the dog food is made in China. What does she do immediately? Throws it out. Throws it out first. She didn't even ask me to throw it out, which she normally does. I'm the garbage man. She throws it out and immediately gets in the car and goes to the store and checks all the dog food. Can't be made in China, made in the U.S. Actually, one lady, I told the story earlier, and I had heard this, that the dog food that they make over there, actually the ingredient, one of the things they do for the soil over there is they put rat poisoning in. Now that ain't going to happen here. So if you're buying a quality item, that quality really is important to you, where do you have a chance to do it? Overseas or here? And that's the trend that's happening. That's why the U.S. is in pretty good position. We've got our problems, no question about it. We have our problems. But it's coming back because now our wages are lower, we have newer technology, we're perceived as having better quality. And is it just with dog food about quality? No. How about autos? Autos, now people are starting to think, you know, those American cars aren't so bad. And it used to be buy American. Ooh, didn't want to buy that. Now you're almost proud to buy an American car. And hopefully they will last. But the edge is coming back. Okay, tax increases. Here's what's probably going to happen. If the fiscal cliff does not go through, in other words, it occurs. I mean, we don't separate. What's going to happen is that your income taxes are going to go up. Your capital gains tax is going to go from 15 to 20%. Your dividends are going to go from 15 to 40%. Your estate taxes, which only affect you if you die, go from, you have the exemption of the first $5 million, drops to $1 million. The rate goes from 35% to 55%. And this is a real thing. Now, hopefully all of us will make it through. But what's going to happen in my case, my wife's case, her mother, lovely woman, but she is suffering from severe dementia. So she doesn't know who my wife is. She doesn't know who the grandkids are. And she's awake about 2 hours a day staring into space. If I talk to her once, I talk to her 1,000 times. I don't want to live like this. But she is. She's in hospice for the second time now. And my heart goes out to my wife and my daughter, not the sister-in-law. They're hoping her mother dies. That's a heavy, heavy burden. It's a guilt-ridden thing. Because A, it's costing the money, but more importantly, if she dies on January 2nd and they don't do anything, it will cost them hard dollars out of their pocket, $550,000. And she is not a rich person by any stretch of the imagination. Most of you in this room are richer than my mother-in-law. That's how much the effect is. If she dies between now and the first of the year, it's $550,000 in their pocket if they don't extend it. It's that big. Dividend stocks are going to go from an effective tax rate of 15 to 40%. When Obama won, which makes it more likely that that will be either part of a compromise or it will go into effect on January 1, investors said, I'm getting out. I'll take my capital gains. I'll sell my dividend-paying stocks. And we'll see about what happens down the road. That's why the drop was the largest drop for an incumbent president coming back in since, anybody know? Harry Truman. Because it was a surprise. Remember what happened to Harry Truman? Dewey wins. He won the election. It was a surprise. So my point is that you're probably going to get an extension, but that extension is either going to be similar to what Obama wants now because he really controls more of the cards, or more likely, and if this happens, which is put up by the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a hotbed of liberalism, that the tax rate, the tax code, would be reformed by keeping rates where they are or dropping rates, but getting rid of all the exemptions. All the exemptions. And there's roughly 1,600 loopholes for big corporations, an earmark for them. Getting rid of that. But he'd also have to get rid of, and why didn't Romney say this during the election, what are the two big things that middle-income people, the housing and, well, the mortgage and housing, charities. Those are the two, okay? Why didn't Romney say that? If he had done it, the Democrats would have just blown him out of the water, and he would have been negotiating with himself. But here is the plan that the Wall Street Journal came up with, and I think it makes sense. Now, that means it won't happen. But if you get a sense of when they start talking about the reform, and it could be in the next few weeks, hopefully it will, they won't get the whole thing done, but they'll get a general outline, is they say, okay, we're going to keep the rates where they're at. That's what Obama wants. Or raise them. Well, if we're not going to raise them, we're going to get rid of all these deductions. Well, Obama doesn't want to get rid of the home deduction, the charitable deduction. He says, okay, you can keep them. Fine. But you're going to dollar amount limit it. You're going to cap it at a certain dollar amount. And that number at the high side is $25,000. So if the average person has a mortgage out there of $300,000, and at today's interest rates, how much is he or she paying in interest? $10,000. How much is he or she paying, making in charities? A couple thousand? Double that. And that's where I think you're going to see a cap on the amount of deductions, keeping the home mortgage, keeping the charities, getting rid of the corporate loopholes, with either lowering the rates or keeping the rates where they're at. If that goes from my mouth to God's ears, and those are geniuses in Washington, you will see the stock market take off. Because that is one of the big things that's hanging over there. There's always uncertainties. There's China, there's Europe. I could talk about that forever. We got to get out of here. But that is the big one. What will happen with the tax code? What will happen with the spending? If that compromise seems to be taking place, the stock market will take off. And I know Paul doesn't like me to make predictions. But I will tell you, if you're nice enough to have me back in 4 years, I don't want to say next year, but in 4 years, the stock market will be anywhere from 18 to 20,000 on the Dow. So don't worry about what's going to happen over the next few weeks. Now, if the fiscal cliff does take effect and the market goes down, well, it won't be so good for a while. Then you got to sit and talk to Paul, and Paul will say, remember what Miles said, just wait. If the fiscal cliff is solved, then that will happen a lot sooner. Anyways, thank you very much. I'm glad you have me back, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a lot.
As we've assessed things, when we look at economists and analysts, because you're going to hear a lot in the next couple days, next few weeks, about what they think. As Miles Gordon mentioned, we got the fiscal cliff, we've got uncertainties about the European situation, among others. Just remember this. Analysts are pretty good, in fact, quite good at talking about what happened that day. They're pretty good at telling you why it happened. But you know what? They're not good at all at telling you what's going to happen. I mean, you know as well as I do, you turn on the TV or look at the web 3 days later and they're going to say something different. So that brings me to the 3 statements about the investment professionals, or from the investment professionals, that I think really are probably the best thing to leave you with today. Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch, and John Templeton, 3 noted investment managers. And when they have 3 quotes that I think will give us a sense for what is appropriate to leave the room with. And first of all, Warren Buffett says, we don't have, never have had, and never will have an opinion about whether the stock market, interest rates, or business activity will be a year from now. You see, Warren Buffett buys quality companies, doesn't he? Holds them for the long term, makes adjustments as fundamentals change. Pretty successful. Peter Lynch, noted growth manager of the 80s from a small company in Boston called Fidelity. said this: I have no feeling for the direction of the market over the near term or the next 3 to 12 months, and that has always been my position. It's a pretty successful manager. Now, we do have an economic overlay on your portfolio, so we certainly are sensitive to the season of the market that we're in. We have, as many of you know, an alternative sleeve in your portfolio. Now, let me tell you what John Templeton said. John Templeton, I think he says it well, says, ignore fluctuations, do not try to outguess the stock market, buy a quality portfolio and invest for the long term. And ladies, gentlemen, friends, clients, you've trusted us to do just that. So we thank you all for being part of our event today. We're so thankful you attended. Take this opportunity to talk with Tim or any one of your financial team as you leave. There'll be some additional reprints that you've seen, so if you know folks that would be interested in our services and want to take some for your reference, please feel free to do that. Take care. Thank you very much for attending. Again, it's our honor to serve you.